The mystery behind empty chairs. Ambassador Kethvar of the Stellar Confederation adjusted his ceremonial scales as he reviewed the delegate roster for the upcoming Galactic Peace Assembly. The massive reptilian being had overseen 15 of these gatherings, watching as 47 different species came together to discuss trade disputes, territorial agreements, and conflict resolution. Yet one pattern had always bothered him, gnawing at his analytical mind like a persistent itch. The humans never brought their military. Every other species followed the unwritten tradition. The warrior poets of the Thorak Empire arrived with their battle singers, beings who could compose death ballads while planning strategic campaigns. The silicon-based crystalline collective sent their shard commanders, living weapons whose bodies could reshape into defensive formations. Even the peaceful meadow dwellers of Verdania brought their harmony keepers, pacifist warriors, trained in non-lethal crowd control. But Earth? Earth sent diplomats, scientists, cultural advisors, and trade specialists. Never a single uniformed officer. Kethavar's assistant, a floating gas being named Wisp, drifted closer to his workstation. Your scales are darkening again, Ambassador. You're thinking about the humans. How can I not? Kethavar's tail swept across the floor in frustration. 15 assemblies, Wisp. 15 times I've watched every species present their military advisors for the traditional strategic cooperation forums, and 15 times the human delegation has politely declined to participate. Perhaps they simply prefer civilian oversight of their armed forces, Wisp suggested, their gaseous form shimmering with bioluminescent patterns of curiosity. No. Kethvar pulled up holographic displays showing Earth's known military capabilities. Their orbital defense platforms are sophisticated, their naval vessels well-designed, their ground forces disciplined. They have military strength, but they hide it from us. Why? The question had haunted him since his third assembly, when he'd first noticed Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's lead diplomatic representative. She was small by galactic standards, barely reaching Kethvar's chest, with dark hair streaked with silver and eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. What struck him wasn't her appearance, but her reactions. During the crisis simulation exercise, where delegates role-played responses to theoretical galactic emergencies, most species representatives had deferred to their military advisors. The Thorak battle singer had composed a stirring war chant about glorious last stands. The Vorthon Republic's general had immediately begun calculating fleet movements and resource allocation. The Zephyrian Collective's war mind had started analyzing enemy weaknesses and battle formations. But Dr. Chen had done something different. She had listened, truly listened, to each presentation. Then she had spoken quietly about alternative solutions, about finding common ground between conflicting positions, about turning enemies into reluctant allies. Her suggestions had been so elegant, so perfectly crafted to appeal to each species' cultural values, that the simulation had ended not in theoretical warfare, but in theoretical cooperation. She thinks like a strategist, Kethvar had confided to Wisp afterward, but she claims to be purely civilian. Now preparing for the 16th Assembly, Kethvar decided he needed answers. He had tried official inquiries, but they led nowhere. Earth's responses were always polite, always technically correct, always unsatisfying. They spoke of civilian oversight and diplomatic tradition and peaceful intentions. But Kethvar had lived through 3 actual wars. He knew the difference between weakness and hidden strength. His research had uncovered disturbing patterns. 6 years ago, when the Thorak Empire and the Zephyrian Collective had nearly come to blows over mining rights in the neutral zone, it was Dr. Chen who had suggested the profit-sharing arrangement that satisfied both sides. 4 years ago, when the Crystalline Collective had threatened to withdraw from the assembly over what they perceived as discrimination against silicon-based life, it was Dr. Chen who had crafted the new inclusion protocols that made them feel valued. 3 years ago, when the Vorthon Republic's military advisor, General Braktor, had begun making aggressive noises about primitive species needing proper guidance, the general had mysteriously fallen ill with a rare condition that affected his speech centers. He'd recovered fully, but only after being treated by Earth's medical team. When he returned to the assembly, his attitude had completely changed. He became a model of diplomatic cooperation, The same thing had happened to two other aggressively minded military leaders from different species. Always the same pattern. They challenged human policies. They became ill with obscure but non-fatal conditions. They were treated by Earth's medical team, and they returned as diplomatic converts. Coincidence? Kethvar's predator instincts said, no. The doors to his office chimed, indicating a visitor. Enter, he called, expecting Wisp with the daily briefings. Instead, a human male stepped through the doorway. He was tall for his species, with graying hair and watchful eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room in a single glance. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth diplomatic security. But something about his posture, his movement, his presence made Kethvar's scales prickle with recognition. This was a predator trying to look harmless. Ambassador Kethvar, the human said, extending his hand in the Earth greeting custom. I'm Marcus Webb, Chief of Security for the Earth delegation. I hope you don't mind the unscheduled visit. Kethvar accepted the handshake, noting how the human's grip was precisely calibrated. Firm enough to show respect, gentle enough to avoid seeming threatening to a species with different bone density. Of course not, Mr. Webb. How can I assist you? I understand you've been asking questions about our delegation's composition, Webb said, settling into a chair with fluid grace. Dr. Chen thought it might be helpful if we had a conversation. The directness caught Kethvar off guard. He'd expected denials, deflections, the usual diplomatic dance. I have some curiosities about Earth's policies, yes. Curiosities? Webb smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's one way to put it. You've made 17 official inquiries in the past 2 years, Ambassador. You've requested our military organizational charts, our defense protocols, our strategic planning documents. That's more than curiosity. I seek understanding, Kethvar said carefully. Earth is unique among the Assembly's members in its approach to military representation. As someone who helps coordinate these gatherings, I believe I have a right to understand why. Webb leaned back in his chair and something in his posture shifted. The harmless diplomatic facade didn't disappear, but underneath it, Kethvar caught a glimpse of something else. Something that made his ancient survival instincts whisper warnings. You're right, Webb said quietly. You do have a right to understand, but understanding comes with responsibility, Ambassador. Are you prepared for that? What kind of responsibility? The responsibility of keeping dangerous knowledge safe. The room fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the environmental systems. Kethvar found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about the human sitting across from him. Webb's uniform bore no military insignia, no rank markers, no indication of combat training. But the way he sat, the way he watched, the way he seemed to control the very atmosphere of the room. You're not civilian security, are you? Kethvar asked. Webb's smile became more genuine. That's a complicated question, Ambassador. According to Earth's official records, I've never served in our military. According to my training, experience, and psychological profile, he shrugged. Well, that's part of what we need to discuss. Dr. Chen would like to meet with you tomorrow evening after the day's official sessions. Privately. She's prepared to answer your questions, Ambassador, but only if you're prepared to understand why those answers have been kept private. Kethvar's scales shifted to deep purple, indicating intense thought. And if I decline this meeting? Then nothing changes, Webb said, standing with the same fluid grace he'd shown entering. You continue asking questions, we continue giving polite non-answers, and the Assembly continues functioning as it always has. But your curiosity remains unsatisfied. And if I accept? Webb paused at the door. Then you learn why some of the galaxy's strongest species choose to appear weak, Ambassador. Why some shields work best when they're invisible. After Webb left, Kethvar sat alone in his office, staring at the holographic displays of military data from dozens of species. The Thorak with their battle singers, the Zephyrians with their war minds, the Vorthans with their strategic commanders, all of them proud to display their martial prowess, eager to demonstrate their military sophistication. All of them, perhaps, missing something important about the nature of true strength. Wisp drifted back into the office, their gaseous form, pulsing with concern. Your scales have been cycling through thought patterns for the past hour, Ambassador. What did the human want? To offer me answers, Kethavar said slowly. The question is whether I'm brave enough to hear them. He thought about Dr. Chen's elegant solutions to seemingly impossible problems. He thought about Webb's predator stillness masked by diplomatic courtesy. He thought about 15 years of human delegates who never seemed surprised by anything, never seemed unprepared for any challenge, never seemed to need military advisors because they somehow always knew exactly what to do. Maybe the humans weren't hiding their weakness. Maybe they were hiding their strength. The next evening couldn't come soon enough. What happens when predators gather? The private dining chamber in the diplomatic quarter was designed for intimate conversations between species, with different environmental needs. The atmospheric controls allowed for multiple breathing mixtures, the lighting could be adjusted for various visual spectrums, and the furniture could adapt to accommodate everything from the massive thorax to the delicate whisper birds of the outer rim. Dr. Sarah Chen had chosen this location carefully, Kethavar realized as he entered. Neutral ground, comfortable for all parties, but private enough for sensitive discussions. She rose to greet him, her movements economical and purposeful. Ambassador, Kethavar, thank you for coming. Please make yourself comfortable. Marcus Webb was already present, along with another human Kethavar didn't recognize. A woman with steel-gray hair and the kind of eyes that seemed to have seen too much. She was introduced as Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, described simply as a consultant on interspecies relations. As they settled around the adaptive table, Dr. Chen activated a small device that filled the room with a barely audible hum. Privacy field, she explained. What we discuss here stays here unless you choose otherwise. You promised answers, Kethavar said, his diplomatic training warring with his curiosity. I'm listening. Dr. Chen nodded, then did something unexpected. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing a series of small scars along her forearms. Before I became a diplomat, Ambassador, I served in Earth's military for 12 years. Special operations, specifically. The revelation hit Kethavar like a physical blow. But your records are accurate, Webb interjected. Dr. Chen is officially a civilian, has been for 8 years. But you asked why we don't bring military advisors to these assemblies. The truth is, we do. We just don't identify them as such. Doctor. Hayes leaned forward, her voice carrying the weight of authority. Ambassador, what do you know about human evolutionary history? The basics, Kethavar replied cautiously. Persistence hunters from a high-gravity world. Adaptable omnivores with sophisticated tool use. Persistence hunters, Dr. Hayes repeated. That's the key phrase. Do you understand what that means, biologically speaking? Kethavar's education had included xenobiology, but he sensed this was leading somewhere important. Humans evolved to track and exhaust prey over long distances. It requires endurance, patience, and the ability to predict behavior patterns. Exactly, but there's more to it than that. Dr. Hayes activated a holographic display showing human neural scans. Persistence hunting requires a very specific type of mental processing. The hunter must simultaneously track multiple variables: terrain, weather, prey behavior, resource availability, alternate routes, escape patterns. The brain develops to see everything as part of an interconnected system. The neural patterns were fascinating, showing activity levels across regions of the human brain that seem to work in complex harmony. This is remarkable, Kethavar admitted. But I still don't understand the relevance to military representation. Dr. Chen's expression grew somber. Because, Ambassador, when you train that kind of brain for warfare, the results are problematic in diplomatic settings. She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a recording from what appeared to be a formal military briefing. A human officer in uniform was addressing a mixed group of alien military leaders, pointing to tactical displays and speaking in measured tones. This is Colonel James Mitchell, Dr. Chen explained. one of our finest strategic minds. This recording is from the first galactic peace assembly that Earth attended 20 years ago. We brought him as our military representative, following standard protocol. Kethvar watched as the human officer interacted with the alien military leaders. At first, everything seemed normal. Professional exchanges, tactical discussions, the usual military courtesies. But gradually he began to notice something unsettling. The alien officers were becoming agitated. "Watch their body language," Webb advised quietly. "See how they start positioning themselves differently around Colonel Mitchell? How their defensive postures increase?" It was subtle at first, but undeniable once pointed out. The Thorak battlesingers' scales were darkening with territorial aggression. The Zephyrian Warmind's tentacles were extending in a threat display. The Vorthon general's crest was rising, indicating challenge readiness. "What's happening?" Kethvar asked. "Colonel Mitchell is doing his job," Dr. Hayes explained. "He's analyzing the tactical situation, assessing capabilities, identifying strengths and weaknesses. It's what any good military officer would do. But when a human does it, it's different." Dr. Chen's voice was heavy with old regret. "Our pattern recognition, our systems thinking, our persistence hunter instincts, they combine to create analysis that's comprehensive. Colonel Mitchell wasn't just assessing the other species' military capabilities. He was unconsciously cataloging vulnerabilities, resource weaknesses, strategic blind spots, psychological pressure points." The recording continued, and Kethvar could see the situation deteriorating. The alien officers were no longer listening to Mitchell's words. They were reacting to something else, something primal. "They sense it," Webb said quietly. "Predator species recognize other predator species, even when those predators are trying to be diplomatic. And when a predator starts evaluating you as prey." "The Thorak Empire withdrew from that first assembly after 6 hours," Dr. Chen continued. "They claimed humans were aggressive infiltrators planning conquest. The Zephyrian Collective demanded that Earth be expelled from the galactic community as a clear and present danger. The Vorthon Republic began mobilizing their fleets, convinced we were about to launch a preemptive strike." Kethvar stared at the frozen holographic image of Colonel Mitchell, who looked utterly confused by the chaos erupting around him. "But he was just doing his job." "Exactly. And that's the problem." Dr. Hayes deactivated the display. "Human military training takes our natural analytical abilities and amplifies them exponentially. We learn to see everything: terrain, resources, personnel, logistics, psychology, culture, technology, as components in a vast strategic puzzle. It's made us incredibly effective at warfare. But devastating at peace," Dr. Chen added. When Colonel Mitchell looked at the Thorak battlesinger, he didn't see a fellow officer. He saw a being whose combat effectiveness depended on morale and ritual, whose vocal cords could be targeted to eliminate their primary weapon, whose cultural honor codes created predictable tactical limitations. "When he observed the Zephyrian Warmind," Webb continued, "he automatically noted their dependency on pheromone communication, their vulnerability to sensory overload, their collective decision-making process that could be disrupted by isolating key nodes." "And the Vorthon general?" "Psychological profile indicating insecurity about personal combat skills, overcompensation through aggressive rhetoric, strategic thinking hampered by need for constant validation from subordinates." Dr. Chen's voice was flat, clinical. "All of this analysis happened automatically, unconsciously. Colonel Mitchell couldn't help it any more than you can help your scales changing color when you experience strong emotions. The implications were staggering." "So you stopped bringing military representatives?" "We tried compromise solutions first," Dr. Hayes said. "Lower-ranking officers, personnel with diplomatic training, even retired military with civilian oversight. But the problem isn't rank or training. It's neurology. The persistence hunter brain combined with military education creates a form of analysis that other species interpret as threat assessment." "Because it is threat assessment," Webb added, bluntly. "We can't turn it off." Put a human soldier in a room with potential enemies and they will automatically, instinctively, unconsciously evaluate every possible way to defeat those enemies. It's not malicious. It's just how we're wired. Kethvar felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. The incidents with General Braktor and the others, the mysterious illnesses, Dr. Chen and her colleagues exchanged glances. What incidents? She asked carefully. Don't play innocent now, Kethvar said, his scales flickering with frustrated amusement. 3 aggressive military leaders over the past few years, all of whom became mysteriously ill after challenging human policies, all of whom were treated by your medical team, all of whom returned to the assemblies as models of diplomatic cooperation. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, Dr. Hayes spoke. Ambassador, are you asking if we chemically or biologically altered the mental states of other species' military representatives? I'm asking what happened to them. They talked to Dr. Chen, Webb said simply. Just like you're talking to her now. They learned what you're learning. They discovered that their assumptions about human weakness were incorrect, and they adjusted their behavior accordingly. That's all? That's all, Dr. Chen confirmed. Though I understand why the pattern might seem suspicious. When aggressive individuals learn that their aggression is counterproductive, they tend to become remarkably cooperative, remarkably quickly. Kethvar considered this, his analytical mind examining the explanation for flaws. Show me, he said finally. Show you what? Show me what they saw. Show me what a human military mind really looks like when it analyzes a potential threat. The 3 humans exchanged another glance, this one longer and more meaningful. Ambassador, Dr. Chen said slowly, are you absolutely certain you want that demonstration? Yes. Dr. Hayes stood and walked to the far end of the room, positioning herself as if she were an opposing military officer. Colonel Mitchell, retired, she announced, and her entire demeanor shifted. The consultative academic vanished, replaced by something harder, more focused, infinitely more dangerous. And then Dr. Chen changed. It was subtle at first, just a shift in posture, a different quality of attention. But as Kethvar watched, he began to see what the alien officers in that first assembly had seen. Dr. Chen's eyes weren't just looking at Dr. Hayes anymore. They were cataloging, analyzing, measuring. Target assessment, Dr. Chen said, her voice taking on a clinical tone that made Kethvar's survival instincts scream warnings. Human female, approximately 60 years old, civilian clothing over military grade, physical conditioning. Stance indicates combat training, specific patterns suggest special forces background. Scar on left hand consistent with blade work, calluses on knuckles indicate sustained hand-to-hand practice. She paused, tilted her head slightly and continued. Psychological profile, controlled aggression, high intelligence, leadership experience, potential weaknesses, age-related decrease in reaction speed, possible joint problems from old injuries, emotional attachment to subordinates could be exploited. Recommended engagement strategy, avoid direct confrontation, target support structure, use superior mobility and endurance to create advantageous conditions. Dr. Hayes relaxed her pose. How did that feel, Ambassador? Kethvar realized his scales had shifted to the deep black of extreme alarm, and his body had unconsciously moved into a defensive crouch. The rational part of his mind knew he was in no danger, but every instinct screamed that he had just watched one predator evaluate another. That was terrifying, he admitted. And that, Dr. Chen said, returning to her normal diplomatic demeanor, is why Earth doesn't send military representatives to peace summits. When we do that kind of analysis on allies, they stop being allies very quickly. The price of peace. The revelation hung in the air like an unexploded weapon, and Kethvar found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about human nature. But you're all doing it anyway, he said slowly. All of you. Right now. You're analyzing me, this room, every possible threat or advantage. Dr. Chen nodded sadly. We can't help it, Ambassador. It's as automatic as breathing. The difference is that we've learned to keep it internal, to act on cooperation rather than conquest. How? Dr. Hayes resumed her seat, her academic demeanor fully restored. Intensive retraining. Every human who serves in our diplomatic corps undergoes a process we call rewiring. We learn to channel our analytical instincts toward building bridges instead of burning them. Show me. This time, Dr. Chen turned her attention to Kethvar himself. But instead of the clinical assessment he'd witnessed moments before, something different happened. Her eyes still catalogued details, but the interpretation was completely different. Kethvar of the Stellar Confederation, she said, her voice warm with genuine interest. Reptilian humanoid. Approximately 2 centuries old based on scale patterns and bearing. Highly intelligent, as evidenced by complex question formulation and persistence in seeking answers. Natural diplomat, but with predator ancestry. Note, the way his tail positions for balance when uncertain, the way his scales shift color with emotional states. She paused, considering. Personal motivations, genuine desire for understanding, concern for galactic stability, intellectual curiosity about anomalous patterns, potential for cooperation. Extremely high, provided trust can be established through transparency and mutual respect. Recommended engagement strategy, complete honesty, acknowledgement of his legitimate concerns, and invitation to partnership in maintaining the balance he values. The difference was remarkable. Where the military analysis had felt like being examined by a hunter, this felt like being understood by a friend. That's the difference, Webb explained. Same observational skills, same pattern recognition, but trained toward building relationships instead of exploiting vulnerabilities. How many of you are there? Kethvar asked. Enough, Dr. Chen replied. Our entire diplomatic corps consists of individuals with the right combination of analytical ability and emotional intelligence. Most are former military, some are civilian. Specialists who showed aptitude for the work. All have undergone the rewiring process. And it works? You tell me, Ambassador. How many wars has the Galactic Peace Assembly prevented in the past 15 years? Kethvar had to think about it. Dozens. The Thorax-Zephyrian mining dispute, the Vorthon expansion conflicts, the crystalline collective integration crisis. He paused as another pattern became visible. You were involved in resolving all of those. Not just involved, Dr. Hayes said. We designed most of the solutions. Human pattern recognition doesn't just identify problems, Ambassador. It identifies solutions. We see the connections between seemingly unrelated factors, the pressure points that can be adjusted to change entire systems. Dr. Chen activated another holographic display, this one showing a complex web of interstellar relationships. Trade routes, territorial boundaries, resource flows, diplomatic ties, hundreds of thousands of connections between the Assembly's member species. This is what we see when we look at galactic politics, she explained. Not individual conflicts, but the entire system. When the Thorak and Zephyrians were fighting over mining rights, we saw that the real issue was resource insecurity affecting 6 different species. The solution wasn't to choose sides, but to restructure the entire resource distribution network. The holographic web shifted, showing how a single change in trade agreements had cascaded through multiple relationships, stabilizing tensions across dozens of systems. When the Vorthon Republic started making noises about primitive species, Webb continued, we saw that General Braktor's aggression was actually masking deep insecurity about his species' declining military relevance in an increasingly peaceful galaxy. The solution wasn't to confront him, but to give him a new role where his skills were valued. What role? He's now the Assembly's chief advisor on conflict de-escalation, Dr. Chen said with a slight smile. Turns out that understanding violence makes you very good at preventing it. Kethvar stared at the holographic display, beginning to grasp the full scope of what the humans had been doing. You've been managing the entire galactic political system. Guiding it, Dr. Hayes corrected. We don't control anything, Ambassador. We just adjust the conditions that allow natural cooperation to flourish. And no one knows. A few individuals like yourself have figured out pieces of it, Dr. Chen admitted. But the full picture? No. And that's intentional. Why? Webb leaned forward, his expression serious. Because the moment other species realize what we're doing, it stops working. Cooperation built on manipulation isn't genuine cooperation. It's just a more sophisticated form of conquest. But what you're doing isn't manipulation, Kethvar protested. You're solving genuine problems, addressing real concerns. Are we? Dr. Chen's voice carried a note of uncertainty that surprised him. Or are we imposing human solutions on non-human problems? That's the question that keeps me awake at night, Ambassador. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Kethvar spoke. What happens if you stop? We don't know, Dr. Hayes admitted. Maybe the galaxy continues on its current peaceful trajectory. Maybe the systems we've helped establish are stable enough to persist without our guidance. Or maybe everything falls apart, Webb added grimly. Maybe the species we've helped learn to cooperate revert to their natural competitive patterns. Maybe conflicts we've prevented just get postponed. Dr. Chen stood and moved to the window, looking out at the lights of the diplomatic quarter, where dozens of species work together in relative harmony. That's the burden we carry, Ambassador. We can't be sure whether we're preventing wars or just delaying them. We can't know if our solutions are truly beneficial or just temporarily convenient. But you continue anyway. Because the alternative is watching species destroy each other over problems we know how to solve, she replied. Because sometimes the responsibility of power is using it wisely, even when you're not certain what wisdom looks like. Kethvar joined her at the window, his scales shifting to deep blue as he contemplated the complexity of what he'd learned. What do you want from me? Understanding, Dr. Chen said simply. And if possible, help. Help with what? Keeping the balance. Webb had moved to join them. You coordinate these assemblies, Ambassador. You see patterns, you notice anomalies, you influence how information flows between species. We could use someone with your perspective helping us identify problems before they become crises. You want me to become part of your conspiracy? We want you to become part of the solution, Dr. Hayes said. The galaxy is more complex now than it was 20 years ago. New species joining the assembly, new technologies changing the balance of power, new challenges that require new approaches. We need allies who understand what we're trying to accomplish. Kethvar considered the offer, weighing the moral implications. If I agree, what changes? Very little on the surface, Dr. Chen replied. You continue your work as always, but when you notice patterns that suggest growing tensions, you share that information with us. When you see opportunities for species to find common ground, you help create the conditions for those conversations to happen. And if I refuse? Nothing changes, Webb assured him. You go back to your duties, we continue our work, and the galaxy keeps turning. Your knowledge of our activities doesn't threaten us, Ambassador. The only thing that could threaten us is active opposition, and you've already demonstrated that your goals align with ours. The truth of that statement resonated through Kethvar's analytical mind. His investigation had been motivated by concern for galactic stability, not by any desire to undermine peace. And now he understood that the human secrecy served the same goal. There's one more thing you should know, Dr. Chen said quietly. We're not the only ones doing this kind of work. Kethvar's scales rippled with surprise. What do you mean? The meadow dwellers of Verdania have been using their empathic abilities to ease tensions during difficult negotiations. The whisper birds of the Outer Rim have been carrying messages between species who refuse to communicate directly. Even your own stellar confederation has been quietly mediating disputes in the outer systems. Everyone's manipulating everyone else? Everyone's trying to prevent the galaxy from tearing itself apart, Dr. Hayes corrected. We're just more systematic about it. The holographic display shifted again, showing not just the web of relationships between species, but the hidden network of individuals and organizations working to maintain stability. Diplomats, traders, scholars, even some military leaders, all connected by a shared understanding that peace required active effort. This is what real galactic civilization looks like, Dr. Chen explained. Not the formal treaties and official protocols, but the informal networks of cooperation that make those treaties possible. Kethvar studied the display, seeing his own work as part of a vast collaborative effort he'd never fully recognized. How long has this been going on? Since the first multi-species contact, Webb replied. Probably longer. Whenever intelligent beings encounter each other, someone has to figure out how to keep them from destroying each other, and humans just happen to be particularly good at it. We're particularly good at seeing the big picture, Dr. Chen acknowledged. But every species contributes something unique. The galaxy works because we all play to our strengths. As the evening drew to a close, Kethvar found himself facing a decision that would reshape his understanding of his own role in galactic affairs. The humans weren't hiding weakness or plotting conquest. They were carrying a burden, the burden of being able to see solutions that others couldn't, of being able to prevent conflicts that others would stumble into, and they were asking him to help carry that burden. "I'll do it," he said finally, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "First, no deception between us. If I'm going to be part of this, I need to know what you're really doing, not just what you think I can handle knowing." "Agreed." "Second, I want to understand the full scope of the network. Who else is involved? What other capabilities exist? What resources are available?" "That will take time, but we can arrange it," Dr. Hayes agreed. "Third, I want regular assessments of our effectiveness. If what we're doing is genuinely helping, we continue. If it's not, or if it's causing more problems than it solves, we stop." Dr. Chen smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression he'd seen from her all evening. "You sound like someone who's thought carefully about the ethical implications of interventionist policies." "I've had to," Kethvar replied. "The Stellar Confederation has faced similar dilemmas in our own expansion. The difference is scale." "And consequences," Webb added soberly. "When we make mistakes here, entire star systems can suffer." As the privacy field deactivated and the room returned to normal diplomatic ambiance, Kethvar felt the weight of new knowledge settling over his consciousness. Tomorrow, he would return to his duties as coordinator of the Galactic Peace Assembly. But now he would see those duties through different eyes, understanding the hidden currents that shaped every discussion, every decision, every carefully crafted compromise. "One final question," he said as they prepared to leave. "The demonstration you gave me tonight, the military analysis followed by the diplomatic approach. How many humans can do both?" "Every member of our diplomatic corps," Dr. Chen replied. "That's what makes the rewiring process so crucial. We need people who understand destruction well enough to prevent it." "And how many of you are there in the Corps?" 47 active diplomats across the galaxy," Webb answered, "plus support, staff consultants and allies like yourself. Not many, considering we're trying to keep peace between several hundred star systems and 47 species." Kethvar's scales shifted to pale green, indicating amazement. 47 people are managing galactic peace? 47 people are helping galactic peace manage itself, Dr. Hayes corrected. "There's a difference." As they parted ways in the corridor outside the dining chamber, Kethvar paused. "Dr. Chen, one more thing. The pattern recognition abilities you've described, the systems thinking, the strategic analysis, do all humans have these capabilities?" She considered the question carefully. "To some degree, yes. It's part of our evolutionary heritage. But like any ability, it can be developed or neglected. Our diplomatic corps consists of individuals who showed exceptional aptitude and were willing to undergo the training necessary to use those abilities constructively. What about the humans who don't undergo that training? The ones who keep their military conditioning intact?" The three humans exchanged glances, and Kethvar sensed he'd touched on something significant. "That, Ambassador," Dr. Chen said quietly, "is why Earth maintains such careful separation between our military and diplomatic functions. Some tools are too dangerous to bring to peace talks." Later that night, alone in his quarters, Kethvar reviewed everything he'd learned. The humans weren't hiding weakness, they were containing strength. They weren't avoiding military representation. They were preventing military escalation. They weren't being secretive out of shame. They were being discreet out of necessity. And now he was part of it. The next morning brought the final day of the Galactic Peace Assembly, with the traditional closing ceremonies and the announcement of agreements reached during the sessions. Kethavar watched with new eyes as Dr. Chen delivered Earth's closing statement, noting how her words were carefully crafted to reinforce positive relationships between species that had experienced tensions. He observed the Thorak delegation's reactions, seeing how they responded to subtle linguistic cues that acknowledged their warrior culture while emphasizing their contributions to peace. He watched the Zephyrian Collective's representatives, noting how Dr. Chen's phrasing appealed to their collective decision-making processes while respecting their individual autonomy. It was masterful, and now he understood why. As delegates began departing for their home systems, Kethavar received a message on his private communication device. The sender was listed simply as friend, but he recognized Dr. Chen's communication protocols. "Welcome to the network, Ambassador. Your first briefing materials are attached. Thank you for choosing to help." The attached files contained more information than he'd expected. Detailed analyses of emerging tensions in 3 different sectors, psychological profiles of key military leaders from 6 species, and economic projections showing how resource scarcity might affect interspecies relationships over the next decade. But what struck him most was a personal note from Dr. Chen. "Ambassador Kethavar, what we do isn't easy, and it isn't perfect. We make mistakes, we sometimes cause unintended consequences, and we carry the constant uncertainty of whether we're truly helping or just imposing our own cultural biases on complex situations. But we do it because the alternative, watching species destroy each other over problems we know how to solve, is unacceptable. Welcome to the burden of seeing solutions. I hope you find it as rewarding as it is difficult." As his ship departed the assembly station, Kethavar looked back at the massive structure that housed representatives from across the galaxy. Somewhere in those corridors, 47 humans were quietly working to keep peace between hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. And now, in a small way, he was part of that effort. The galaxy was more fragile than most beings realized, but it was also more resilient. Not because of any single species' strength, but because of the hidden networks of cooperation that connected them all. The humans had simply found a way to make those networks more effective. In the end, perhaps that was what true strength looked like. Not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to build. Not the ability to conquer, but the skill to connect. Not the impulse to dominate, but the discipline to serve. The Silent Shield Protocol was more than just Earth's policy of keeping military personnel away from peace summits. It was a philosophy, a commitment to using strength in service of peace, rather than in pursuit of power. And as Kethavar began planning his first contribution to that effort, he realized that this was why the galaxy needed humans. Not because they were the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but because they had learned something that others struggled with: how to be dangerous without being destructive, how to be powerful without being oppressive, how to be strong enough to choose peace. The stars wheeled overhead as ships departed for dozens of different worlds, carrying with them the agreements and understandings that would shape galactic civilization for years to come. And in the quiet spaces between official declarations and formal treaties, the real work of peace continued. Unseen, unrecognized, but absolutely essential. The Silent Shield Protocol held, as it had for 20 years and would for years to come. Because sometimes the best way to protect peace is to hide the weapons that could destroy it, and sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to use the power you possess. In the vast complexity of galactic civilization, that might be humanity's most important contribution of all.